Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to the channel if it is your first time checking us out. Hey, today we're gonna talk about the top 7 questions that we get from clients as a custom home builder. So top 7 questions, answers coming up. All right, so like I said, today we're gonna talk about the top 7 questions that we typically get from clients or prospective clients as a custom home builder. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, there's a jillion different questions we get, but these seem to be the top ones that we typically get. At least we get these questions a lot. So number 1 is, do I need land first? A lot of folks, they come to us and they say, hey, I wanna build a custom home. Do I need to buy the land before I come to you to start as a builder, or can you help me with the land purchase process? How does all that work? So number 1, I will say, at least in our area, and we are here in Colorado, we're based in the Pikes Peak, Colorado Springs area, built all over the state of Colorado. And I think this is probably true for most home builders, custom home builders across the country. You don't need to have your land first. And a lot of aspects, there's a benefit to interviewing and selecting a builder before you select the land that you want to buy, that you want to ultimately build on. Because a builder, once you commit to them, they're gonna really do a lot of due diligence and legwork for you to make sure, not only maybe help you find the perfect spot of land, but then also to make sure that you don't make a bad purchase by buying a piece of land or a lot that's gonna be really, really hard to build on, or that you're gonna have extra cost associated with building on it. So number 1, do you need the land first? Definitely not. If you have it, that's perfectly fine, but you certainly don't need to have the land before you come to talk to a custom home builder, definitely. Number 2, how long is it gonna take? Man, this is the $1 million question. We get this a lot. You know, you may have heard us talk before about pros and cons of buying resale or building a custom home. How long does it take? You know, for us, I will say it depends, right? I gotta throw that caveat out there. But for the most part, we usually see about a 12 to 14 month build time. Now that's from the very, very start when you say, hey, let's build a custom home. We want to work with you. From then until the time you're getting your keys and moving in, it's that 12 to 14 months. Now there's a lot of variation in there that kind of, you know, that comes into play. Are you primarily building over the winter time, which we have a lot of stuff that we do to make sure that we don't fall behind schedule even during the winter? How long is do you have a stock plan you want to use? Do you want to come up true just like from custom scratching it up on the back of a napkin? Do you have some ideas ahead of time? Or are you going to have to kind of think through those ideas with the designer? So how long it takes is it's very subjective. It can be, I shouldn't say it's subjective. It's just, there's a big range associated with that. If you're building a 3,500 square foot custom home from a stock plan that you made some alterations to and picked all your own finishes and did it on a lot that was pretty easily buildable, that's gonna be a whole lot different timeline than if you say, hey, I want a 10,000 square foot house in the mountains where we have to remove a ton of rock, and I want all these super high-end finishes that are really, really hard to find and there's a long lead time on. You can probably imagine that's gonna be a lot different build. That's probably like, a 2-year build or more versus that other build that I mentioned. That's probably, like a 10 to 12 month build. So there's a lot of variation in there, but all that to say, I think the easy answer is to just have in your mind, it's gonna take a year. From the time I decide to do it, unless I get crazy, from the time I decide to do it until the time I'm getting my keys, it's gonna be about a year, maybe a little bit more, probably not much less than that. So that's how long it's gonna take. And again, there's a lot of stuff to consider in there. The third one, it's along the same lines, but it's a little bit different because a lot of people get concerned, not just with the build time, but they really wanna specifically know, what's the design time gonna take? How long is it gonna take from the time I sit down with you until we've got a final finished plan that I can picture, I can visualize, I've got some 3D walkthroughs and renderings of, and we're ready to start building the house. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety about that design process. For some folks, it's tougher to make choices. They don't want to have as many options to pick from. And this is where finding a good quality builder that has an in-house designer, an architect that they work with, or maybe even an in-house architect, so that back and forth in communication is super fast and efficient, and you're getting great recommendations because, hey, not all of us are interior designers. Not everybody knows what tile goes together or what hardwood flooring is gonna go with the cabinets in the kitchen. So having a great home builder that has on-staff design personnel, that's gonna save you a ton of time with the back and forth, and I think you're gonna be happier at the end of the day. Most builders, of course, if you have your own designer or architect that you want to work with, they're perfectly fine with that. Sometimes it adds a little bit to the cost, maybe you don't get quite as good a pricing with it, adds a little bit to the timeline. But for the most part, that design time from what we see is, if you want to go from kind of like a stock plan, so maybe a custom home builder has, maybe a portfolio of about maybe 10 different homes that they kind of have that they've built, multiple times around the state or whatever, and you want to just make alterations to that plan, you might be as little as maybe 3 months through that design process. If you're pretty quick at picking out, hey, I like this tile, I like this hardwood, these are the cabinets I like, you pick out all your finishes pretty fast, you get back to the builder real fast whenever they need information from you. 3 to 4 months, very, very doable. I would say on average, for true custom, if you're just starting from the ground up and a little bit of back and forth with the architect, you're probably more like that 5 to 6 months from the time you start that conversation until the builder has actual engineered approved buildable prints that they can go pull permits with. So it kind of depends, of course, like a lot of things in the custom home world, but just remember that if you want to start with a stock plan, you're going to save a little bit of time. If you want to go true custom, like from the ground up, just design it, whatever's in your head, you're probably looking closer to that 6 months for the design time. And a lot of that's going to come down to you and how fast you can pick out and how fast you can finalize your choices on finishes. So what faucets do I want? What cabinets? What lighting fixtures? Because you want to get all that stuff figured out before you actually start digging a hole in the ground, so you know what your total price is going to look like, obviously. And builders are going to want to have all that stuff figured out ahead of time as well. It's going to minimize stress for you down the road as well. So a little bit of a range there for sure on the design time, but 3 to 6 months depends on which way you decide to go. Another question we get from a lot of folks as they're interviewing us as a builder is, what is your warranty like? I know this varies from state to state. In the state of Colorado, a builder has to offer a 10-year warranty on structure. So if your foundation, one of the walls of the foundation falls in 8 years down the road, the builder still has to warrant that. Obviously, something wasn't done right if that happens. So structural things, I think a lot of states across the country have a 10-year warranty that's kind of mandated. And I think most builders probably, adhere to that anyway, of 10-year for structural components of the home. Like I said, foundation, things like that. Most builders I would say 99.9% of builders across the country will offer a 12-month, what I call bumper to bumper. So anything that goes wrong with the house, a little bit of settling, a little tiny drywall crack, the caulking cracks around the trim, because again, the house always settles just a tiny bit. Maybe it's a little dry in your area and you had a little bit of separation in some hardwood or something like that. Builders want to make sure that their clients are happy for the most part, I would say. So most builders will offer that 12-month warranty. Now, us as a custom home builder, we actually do an 18-month home warranty. Our thought process has always been like, if something's messed up, we're going to fix it anyway. Now, if it's 10 years down the road, maybe not. But if it's a little cosmetic thing, but for the most part, if something's wrong with the house or if there's an issue that a client's having, we want the client to be happy. So we're going to go take care of it anyway. So why not just put it in writing? Hey, 18-month home warranty, bumper to bumper. So that's what we do. I think the kind of the industry and national standard is more along the lines like the 12-month warranty. So definitely make sure that your builder offers a home warranty. Make sure it's in writing. Make sure there's detail associated with it, not just we give a 12-month warranty sign here. Make sure you can see exactly what they're actually warranting. And then also a big thing too, this just popped into my mind, is with appliances. Most custom homes have a little bit more expensive appliance packages than what a production home might. So just make sure that you take the time when you get those appliances installed. You're going to get, the instructional booklet and all that jazz that goes with it. You're also going to get the registration paperwork that nobody ever fills out for anything. Make sure you do it for your appliances. If you've got a $10,000 gas range and it stops working after a couple months, you really want to make sure you can pick up the phone and call those folks and say, hey, my range stopped working, come give me a new range or come fix it or whatever. So appliances, because they're big ticket items, and almost all appliance manufacturers warrant their appliances for at least 12 months, but you got to fill out the registration card and send it into them, or do it online, of course. Definitely take the time to do that. That's another warranty item you don't want to forget about, is your appliances. Make sure you get those registered. So that's a little bit on the warranty. The I think we're on fifth question that we get the most is, what changes my cost the most? As you can imagine, most people that come and they want to build a custom home, they've got a budget that they have to adhere to, like we all do. Very few people, nobody that we've been fortunate enough to build a house for, has that unlimited budget. They can do whatever they want to. Everybody has a budget to some degree. So you've got to kind of think through, okay, no matter how big you want your house, no matter what kind of finishes you want, you've got to stay within your budget. And everybody's budget's different, of course. So a lot of folks know, especially people that are super budget conscious, they say, what are the changes that are going to affect my budget the most? And this is where it's a little bit of a subjective thing because it depends on a lot of what the client wants to do. But I would say that, the easy change, I wouldn't say easy changes, but the things that don't affect your price nearly as much are, say if you want to add, let me give you an example. You want to add square footage to your house. If you want to add square footage to the kitchen and make more cabinet space, more countertop space, and a linear foot of cabinets is $400, that's going to cost a lot more than just making your dining room space bigger, where it's just drywall and studs and some electrical and some flooring. So really thinking through, if you're going to add space, what type of space am I going to add? And that's going to have a big impact on what changes your cost the most. The other thing is really going to be, and I've talked about this before, but when we go back and we talk about location on the lot, that's going to change your cost a bunch because you've got extra driveway costs associated with it. You're running utilities farther. Depending on if you're on municipal water, you might be running water lines farther. It might be a little bit more difficult of a dig if you want to get, if you want to do a walkout basement on a lot that really doesn't lend to a walkout basement. So the lot location and specific orientation of the home, that's going to be a big change on your cost. Like I said, adding square footage can be a big change or it may not be a huge change. It depends on how you're adding that square footage. So when we talk about what changes cost the most, I would say specifics of the lot location and build site, and also level of finishes on the inside. So if you want to take, maybe you have a basement floor plan and it has 2 bedrooms and a Jack and Jill bathroom, but now you say, I want to make that 2 en suites. So I want to make it where each bedroom has its own walk-in closet and its own separate bathroom. That's going to add a lot of price to the house versus just making the basement bigger with just a larger rec room. So it's not just about square footage, it's about how you finish out that square footage. So that's another big thing that a lot of people, they say, oh, I just want to add 300 square feet to the house. Well, adding 300 square feet to a house may not cost that much, or if you're adding 300 square feet of kitchen, that's probably going to add a pretty good chunk of change to your overall price. So so lot location, level of finishes, and then how you add extra square footage. Those are going to be 3 big things that are going to affect your costs, I would say probably the most. Another question, this is number 6, I believe. Another question we get a lot of is it best to start from a stock plan or just to start from scratch? So when we say stock plan, we're kind of talking about a lot of custom home builders, maybe because of homes they've built in the past or just other plans. Maybe their architect and designer got together and came up with maybe 5 or 6 plans that they feel really meet the current demand for clients. So that would be a stock plan. It's something they have in their portfolio. The engineer work's already been done. The architect's already done everything. The designer knows what the layout is. So it's basically a buildable blueprint that's ready to go that the builder has on file. That's one option. And then the other option is to say, hey, I'm starting from scratch. I got this plan I came up with in my head when I was floating around a lazy river in Mexico, and this is what I want to build for my house. That's the other end of the spectrum. So I would say that most people, even if they start from a stock plan, by the time they get done, it ends up about the same from a financial standpoint. Because you got to imagine, whenever you start from scratch, now you're talking about architects drawing it, going back and forth, engineers finalizing the plans to make sure it all actually is a buildable house. That's extra cost associated with it, maybe $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 or more to go kind of that from the scratch standpoint. But then whenever you talk about a stock plan, what we've seen is that no matter how much somebody wants to say, hey, this is the plan, I like it, it fits my needs. You sit down around the table with them and you get the designer involved, and next thing you know, you're not just moving walls, you're making, well, what if we made this section of the house a little bit bigger? What if we just extended that wing of the house out? Let's do a 4-car garage instead of a 3-car garage. Let's change the roof line. So typically a quote unquote stock plan ends up really custom at the end of the day, and you end up having enough back and forth with architect and engineer work that it doesn't make a ton of difference at the end of the day. Now, can you save some money? Yeah, if you're the person that just says, hey, you know what? This plan works for me. I don't need to make any changes. All I need to do, I need to move this wall a foot over to make the laundry room bigger and the master closet smaller. That's no big deal. That doesn't really change anything. So from that standpoint, if you can do that, you will save a little bit of money on the design and architect fees, engineering fees as well. But just I found that most people don't do that. Most people, whenever they go down the path of building a custom home, even if they find a stock plan to start from, which can be great because it can save you a lot of kind of that mental anguish of like trying to figure out what the design looks like, and I don't know. It's always a lot easier to to edit somebody's work than it is to come up with it yourself. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of people, they do so many changes anyway to a stock plan that it doesn't really make that big of a difference. And whenever we say which is best for somebody, I just think it's case by case dependent, because if you're the person that is a true visionary and you can picture what you want and you can communicate that to a designer and an architect, that's probably the best thing for you. If you're the type of person that just has a real hard time figuring out exactly what you want it to look like, but you can look at something existing and then figure out how to move things around to make sure you like it, that's probably a better option for you. So I don't think there's a best way one way or the other. I just think there's different options and they just suit different people different ways. So that's the answer to the best to start scratch or best to start with a stock plan. And then the last one that I'll talk about is, and as you can imagine, this one comes up all the time, and it's how do I stay on budget? Like I said, everybody's got a budget to work with, whether it's $5 million or $1 million, everybody's got a budget to work with. So the biggest number one thing I would say is lay out your wants, needs, and desires with anybody that's going to be involved in the build decision-making process. So spouse, partner, kids, if you want them to have a say, whatever the case is, but lay out that information and then come up with a realistic budget. That I cannot stress enough. So many clients come to us and they have what they want and then they have their budget, and the two they just don't match up whatsoever. And we try as hard as we can to try to work with somebody, to work with folks to try to make a home that they're going to love, because that's a big thing for us. We never want to build a home that you regret building. So try to find a balance there. But that's a really hard thing for a lot of folks, is coming in with that realistic budget right off the bat. And what I mean by that is if your budget's $1.2 million, it's $1.2 million. And now we've got to figure out how much house you can get for $1.2 million that checks the boxes that you want as far as design, level of finishes, size, location, all that stuff. And then you've just got to be realistic as the owner, as the buyer, to really just figure out okay, did I check enough of my boxes at that price point that I'm comfortable with it? Have I felt like I had to compromise too much? And if you do, man, maybe it's just not the right time. If you can't move your budget at all, maybe it's not the right time to build. Maybe you just need to kind of hit the pause button. Because like I said, you don't want to spend 1.2 to come up with something you don't like when you could have spent 1.3 to get something you love. Maybe you just kind of have to hold off for a little bit until you're in that position. So realistic budget up front, super, super important. I cannot stress that enough. And that's something, honestly, that your builder should be able to work through with you. If you go to a builder and you say, hey, my budget's $1.2 million, that's a good chunk of change. You think you get a pretty nice house for that, and you certainly can. But the builder's also going to say, oh, you wanted 6,000 square feet? Well, we could probably do like 4,800 maybe, not 6,000. And you wanted a 6-bay garage? Well, maybe we can make it a 4-car garage instead. So a builder's going to be a quality builder and design team. They're going to walk through that process with you. And typically it takes maybe just a couple initial consultations to see if you're in the area, the realm of possibility, the realm of reality, if you will. And then if you're not, then the builder should be honest and tell you that, not try to get you to sign and then make changes later. But they should tell you that, give you that good solid counsel, and then you can make the decision of, hey, can we flex our budget? Or do we just want to wait? Or are we willing to make those compromises to get, to start building right now? So realistic budget up front, cannot stress that enough. You don't want to get down the road and then realize, oh, I actually spent this much money on a house I really don't like. Nobody's happy at the end of that day, trust me. Another thing that's super, super important is, I call them checkpoints, but throughout the design process, you want to make sure that from when you're drafted up your kind of schematic floor plan, so an engineer hasn't looked at it or anything like that, you're basically just sketching out where walls are going to be and room sizes and things like that. From that schematic blueprint, kind of sketch, now we'd start talking about finishes. Now we start having the engineer look at it to see what any structural stuff we have to do. Through all those different phases of design and pre-construction, you really want to make sure that you have checkpoints in there where your builder is saying okay, the schematic has this at this much space and this much blah, blah, blah. Here's roughly where I think we're at. Okay, I'm cool with that. That's what you say as the buyer. Okay, I'm cool with that. Now you get more fidelity involved. You say, okay, I want it exactly right here on the lot, oriented this way. Now, okay, that makes sense. We're still on budget. We're good. Okay, now let's talk finishes. You pick out your finishes, and now the builder says, oh, wait a minute. Now we're creeping above the budget that you guys said you really had to stay within. Let's take a look at these finishes and see what we can adjust. So all those gates and checkpoints throughout the design process are critical Because the last thing you want to do, you don't want to get 4 months down the road and have this house that you absolutely love and you think is gorgeous and wonderful in every way, and then realize like, oh crap, like that's $300,000 over my budget. Of course I like it. You really need to have those gates and checkpoints throughout that design process to make sure that as soon as you start to creep past your budget, the builder stops you, you have a conversation, you figure out what level of compromise you can make, can you find some alternate choices to make, how can you get back on budget? Okay, we're good, now let's go forward a little bit to the next step. So I highly encourage people, don't get all the way to the end of design and then realize that you blew your budget. Figure it out and have those checkpoints and gates throughout that design process so you can make adjustments throughout versus waiting till you get all the way to the end. And then, so that's a huge one for staying on budget. And then the last thing is, this kind of just makes sense. It's logical to me. I mentioned it just before in a previous comment, but alternate choices. So when you go through that design process and you're thinking, man, I blew my budget, how can I get back on budget? Well, you could probably take that $12 a square foot engineered hardwood and you could probably find something for about $5 or $6 a square foot that looks really great. And boom, there you go. You just saved $20,000. So really, like, just those alternate choices, you know, everything doesn't have to be plated in gold. If your budget supports that, we highly encourage it. I think it's a wonderful thing. But if your budget doesn't support that, just make sure that you're being realistic about alternate choices as well. And I go back to a quality builder with a good design team. They're gonna make these recommendations. They're gonna know what your budget is. They're gonna have a good feel for your style and your taste and your design. And they're gonna be able to say, hey, instead of that tile for the master bath, how about we do this tile? Instead of real slate, we do this porcelain. It has a very, very similar look. It's gonna accomplish the style you're looking for at the end of the day, and it's gonna save you $6,000. And we always tell people, like, it's those little line items on a custom build that really add up. So, you know, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm 60 grand over and I only saved $6,000 on tile. If you go back through and really look at those line item choices, you can probably work that budget down. I won't say easily, but you definitely can work that budget back down to get you back to where you need to be. So alternate choices can make a big difference. They're still gonna get you the look and style that you want at the end of the day. And like I said, having a quality builder with a great design team, they're gonna help you through those choices to make sure you end up with A, what you want at the end of the day, and B, within your budget, and stay within that budget throughout the build time. So that's a lot of stuff. Top 7 questions people ask us. I'm just gonna run through them super fast. Do I need land first? No, you don't. How long is it gonna take? It depends, but for our area and with us, you're probably 12 to 14 months, rough estimate. What's the design time? 3 to 6 months, depends on which way you wanna go with it. True, like from the ground up, customer start from a plan. Is there a warranty? Any builder you talk to should have at least a 12-month warranty. We personally do an 18-month home warranty, bumper to bumper. What changes are gonna cost the most? Man, depends on how you add square footage, how you do it, where you put that house on the lot, and the level of finishes that you decide to pick out for the house. Those are 3 biggest things. Is it best to start from scratch or start with a stock plan? It just depends. Everybody's a little bit different. There's pros and cons to all of it, and it's really what fits your personality best. And then how do I stay on budget? Man, be realistic up front. Make sure you have gates and checkpoints throughout the design process to make sure you stayed on budget. And then also don't forget about considering alternate choices as you're going through that design phase as well. Man, hopefully that was good information for you guys. Like I said, we get a ton of questions about custom home builds, and these are just some that really kind of tend to always float to the top. We get a lot of them. So hopefully it was valuable information. No matter where you're trying to build across the country, across the world probably, these 7 are definitely gonna come up, and they probably should for you. If you're in the state of Colorado and you're considering custom home, we'd love the opportunity to chat with you, see if we might be a good fit. And biggest thing, we just wanna make sure you get all the information, make the best decision possible if you think about building. So hey, if it was good information, give us a like, hit the little bell so you get all the notifications, subscribe to the channel. We're putting out new stuff for you every week. All right, everybody, take care.